This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everyone, to this week's edition of the DocNJock Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Adam the Jock Strozinski. On today's show, a WWE personality is very unhappy with his position, as well as a monster partnership between two large wrestling promotions. We're going to get into all of that later on in the show. AEW put out a banger of a show with Dynamite. WWE had both Monday Night Raw and SmackDown doing great things. We're going to break them all down. We're going to sort them all out. Help me do it all. Like always, he's the one. He's the only. He is my top rope juggernaut. He is dropping monster elbows and putting dudes in headlocks. He is the one. He is the only. He is the Doc, John Macaroon. What's up, cuz?
Cuz, did you know this is the new digital sports era? But as well, it's the new DOC era, baby. What a great week of wrestling. We were just chatting before we started. I just thought that, my goodness, if this is how 2025 is going to be, let's go. Fire it up. I was excited all week. I don't know about you, but I've watched the Penta introduction, his debut in WWE multiple times. I loved his promo. I thought he brought the energy. I agree with everybody that said, look, when WWE wants to make you a star, they can make you a star instantly, just like that. And everybody knew who Pentagon Jr. is. They know his variations. George Kittle definitely has highlighted him, but my goodness, with the WWE flair and his entrance, I just thought it was perfect. He looked like a star on Monday, and Raw was just amazing. I thought WWE had a good week top to bottom this week.
Yeah, look, let's just start with Penta. From the moment he walked out, he felt like a big deal. He looked like a big deal. The way that they highlighted him made him feel and made him seem like he was the most important guy on the planet at that moment. It was really well done. And his match with Chad Gable was excellent. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. And then him taking the mic at the very end when they were going to interview him and him cutting his promo, there was passion. There was an energy to it. I thought it was absolutely wonderful to sit there and watch him, give him that time. Now, this is the thing. There's been a lot of rumors, a lot of speculation after he cut that promo. I don't think that promo was all that long, maybe about 5 minutes. The word on the street is he went over his time, which then led to them having to shorten other matches, which to me seems absolutely crazy. To me, it seems like that match was the perfect amount of time, and he didn't take all that long to cut a promo. So if you're going to be mad at anybody, you should be mad at whoever decided to run a 2.5-hour show when you've got 3 hours, which we can double back to Penta in a second. I want to get your take on a shortened Raw this week. 2.5 hours, usually 3 hours, a little bit weird. I liked it. Look, I like the shorter wrestling programming. I think it works better. I think it keeps everything really, really tight. I think this show, specifically for Raw, was well-paced, and it was very, very tight. Lots of matches. I thought it was well done. What did you think about having a shortened Raw?
I loved it. I thought it was perfectly timed. And just to give a little context about Penta going along, you know, there was talk maybe that the WWE wanted to leave the arena by a certain time. So that's why, because people were saying, well, why would anybody care if they go long? WWE controls how long the show is going to go. So why would WWE cut anything? You know what I mean? But, you know, there's always a lot of talk about, you know, nobody's going to like potentially if you have time and, you know, let's say you're allotted for 8 minutes and then Penta goes long so you get 6 minutes. You know, everybody wants their time. But I would say this. I would say that debuts should go like that for all stars. 15, 20 minutes, let them wrestle, let them talk, introduce everybody. So I think that the writers should allocate time and write the show to give debuts 20 minutes and have it go as much as possible. So to me, I don't care who was upset by it. Pentagon was cool as fuck, and I thought it was great. And the show, WWE, the good thing is Triple H said, look, we expect this to go 2.5 hours on average. Sometimes it could be shorter, sometimes it could be longer, and that flexibility is great. But if you're a TV viewer and you want to watch Netflix after the fact, you can get through it even faster. So time is of the essence, and I don't think television audiences need to invest 3 full hours with commercials sitting there watching. It's just too much time. The average movie that's really good in my mind has always been 90 minutes. Yet people, create these manifesto movies at 2.5, 2:45, and you're just like, God dang, you just in your head, you don't want to ever be going, they should cut this, they should cut that. You just want to sit back and enjoy the show. And Raw was thoroughly enjoyable. 2.5 hours should be the sweet spot. So write it like that. And if your shit gets cut too freaking bad, 2.5 hours is perfect. I think everybody loved it. Everybody. I haven't talked to any single person that said, oh, I really demanded another half hour of wrestling on Monday night.
Well, when you look at that show, going back to it, I don't know what you're going to fill in that other half hour. I thought, like I said, I thought everything was buttoned up so tightly. I thought it was so well done. It was like you went from one match, and then if you had a interview segment or you had a vignette in the back, you flowed right into that, right into another match. There might be a commercial break. It just seemed to be very, very smooth. Well-paced is the best way I could describe it. And I thought it was well done. I didn't mind the shortened version. And look, like you said, every new star should debut it the way Penta did. And also him having his family in the front row, I thought that added a really, really nice touch. I thought it was awesome. I am really, really excited to see where Penta goes and how they utilize him. In our group chat, we were kind of joking around because it seems like if you're a luchador or you're a Mexican wrestler, you end up either being in the LWO or you end up being in La Guida, what is it? Santo Escobar's team. I even mistyped it when we were typing in the group chat. Legado del Fantasma. My hope is he doesn't end up getting pigeonholed there, because you remember when Dragon Lee came on. Dragon Lee was incredibly impressive. And they gave him a nice little push. And to be honest with you, you haven't seen Dragon Lee, and I can't tell you how long. So the hope is that they don't do that to Penta. I think Penta comes in with a little bit more gusto than Dragon Lee did. And I think with Penta, you have a lot more rope. He can do a lot more. The one thing I like that WWE did for him is they did give him the microphone. You actually got to hear him. If you remember in AEW, he was usually going through somebody else who was doing the talking for him. I like the fact that they let him cut the promo half in English, half in Spanish. I thought that was absolutely fantastic. I think it adds to his character, and it adds a little bit of depth and adds a little bit of a layer. So I thought his debut was absolutely fantastic. Something else I thought was really good and smart. Lyra Valkyria is your new Intercontinental Champ. The big concerns I have, will she succeed? And I don't know. A lot of times you get NXT stars who come up to the main roster and they're kind of already made. You go back, you look at Bayley, you look at Sasha Banks, you look at Charlotte Flair, you look at Becky Lynch, you look at those 4 horsewomen. They came up to the main roster, they were already made. You look at some of the other wrestlers who have come up. I think when Zoe Starks came up, I think Zoe Starks was a little bit ahead of Lyra Valkyria, where she's at right now. You look at Shayna Baszler, you look at Rhea Ripley. They were definitely miles ahead of where Lyra Valkyria is now. And Shayna, not so much of a success story, but Rhea Ripley, obviously a monster success story. I don't know if I see the same future for Lyra Valkyria, and putting the Intercontinental Women's Championship on her, making her the inaugural champ, I think can help elevate her, but she's going to have a lot of work to do. She's going to have to make this work, because I don't see the natural progression from her that I did with a Rhea Ripley. Do you think she succeeds, and does the Intercontinental Championship help her to succeed?
I do, for one reason. I think the WWE is recognizing, okay, the U.S. Championship on SmackDown with Chelsea Green and the Intercontinental Championship now presents an opportunity where the belt can help elevate a performer. And I think that you could have opportunities for those that are not being utilized. A Natalya trying to fight for the title. You have a bunch of contenders that now can be put in these matches. And here's what, the yin and the yang of a shortened show with only 4 to 5 matches. You get time. And these women, I think now, will be given the opportunity. And you would think that the IC belt will be featured a little bit more, probably at least twice a month on Netflix. And
you would hope.
You would hope. So I do believe that there will be opportunities for her to get over with time, with mic time, with creativity. And I think that that given the emphasis now that you're going to have to place, whether it be her or other women, I do think that the goal for 2025 should be, being that, I don't know if it's true or not because I didn't really thoroughly check the source, but before we came on, you messaged me and I waited a couple extra minutes because I was browsing Twitter for some wrestling news, and something came across where it said Nick Khan says that 40% right now of the WWE audience is women. And if that's the case, if that's how much viewership is now coming in from women who are probably enjoying oily men running around the ring there, I think that the opportunity for women to capture the attention of other women will be spectacular. And I think that that's the goal in 25 for WWE, is to take advantage of being on Netflix, bigger audience, create more stars from the mid-card, and the women have to get more time because it kind of, in 2024, it took a little bit of a dip. The matches got a little bit better toward the end of the year, but you did have a lot of big injuries, and I think that the debut of some of your big stars kind of did not hit the home run grand slam that we all thought. So the women have to take advantage of their chance, and I think they will this year.
Yeah, and look, if you can put that into a bigger context, if you could just get your viewing audience and your attending audience somewhere closer to 50-50, I know 40-60 is great.
Yeah.
But if you can get it closer to 50-50, how much of an increase is that for what you're bringing through the turnstiles, for what you have tuning in? It opens up a whole other world for you, and I think that's fantastic. That shows the rise and the growth of WWE in this period. It's weird. Wrestling goes in these streaks, right? Like in the 80s when we were kids, wrestling was huge, right? And then you kind of got into this weird little slowdown in the early 90s, and then late 90s, early 2000s, you had wrestling booming again. And then it kind of waned a little bit. And then we kind of got to the mid 2010s and things started to kind of pick up again, and then it kind of waned a little bit, not much, but just a little, and now we're kind of back in this boom period in the mid 2020s. So it's weird how it ebbs and it flows, and if you're able to add more women to your viewing audience, it does a lot of things. It brings children in, because if mom is watching and dad is watching, the kids are definitely watching. Women are usually not the target demographic. So if you're able to offset what you're bringing in, and you've got more women than you normally do, that's a monster boost to what you're presenting to, and that helps drive ticket sales, helps drive merch sales, helps drive ad revenue. It really, really does help the product and does help the company. Something that might need help: the Judgment Day. Is the Judgment Day on life support after this match between Damian Priest and Finn Balor? My hope was that I don't necessarily want Judgment Day to go away. I just want this storyline between Damian Priest and Finn Balor to go away. I don't want to see these two guys wrestling anymore. I don't want to see Damian Priest mixed up with the Judgment Day anymore. But it really kind of feels like the Judgment Day might be splintering from the inside out. You have a little bit of friction between Liv and Dom, even though Liv says everything is good. You still have Finn being arrogant Finn. You've got Dominic Mysterio kind of being ambivalent to everything that's going on. And then you look at what took place in this match between Damian Priest and Finn Balor, and Finn Balor gets basically annihilated. What are your thoughts on the Judgment Day, and are they coming to an end? Is this cycle with the Judgment Day coming to its final days, or is this just maybe a temporary reset so we can get Damian Priest away from this group?
Yeah, it's one of those deals where I think that it had the feel of a finale with Damian Priest in a street fight against Finn Balor. Look, to me, I would say if there's one overdone cook gimmick, it's the wrestler on the gurney, and then the other wrestler comes in and whoops his ass. It's like, all right, that's the tried and true old bit there that they did, and it's always funny to see. You got Finn Balor laying there with the neck brace on, and he's looking up at Damian Priest, who's about to whoop his ass, and it's hilarious. But I thought that for what they did, it's a natural conclusion. I do think the Judgment Day has run its course because, it's just uniquely one of those deals where, the founder, Edge, is in a different company. And Rhea Ripley, I think it for the purpose of what it needed to do, it accomplished everything. You elevated Dom. You get Liv in the mix as well. You create a nice feud with Rhea Ripley. She gets elevated, but I think that maybe if you revisit the story of the Judgment Day, when she came in, she just overpowered the group. I think the one person that didn't take advantage as much because he's still there and it's kind of just like a sidebar jabroni is JD. Like, I think JD can wrestle. Like, I think JD and Penta could have a good match. For Penta, I think it's interesting that people are talking maybe a WrestleMania moment with Rey Mysterio, but I do think that Penta should just maybe, doesn't need to have feuds, just get into the ring and just showcase a little bit, because I do think the one thing about his debut that I did not like was Michael Cole comes in and goes, "Wow, Pat, you're going to be wowed by the shit this guy does." And I think that basically he didn't bring out all the wild ass shit that he does. He did jump over the top rope. He did try the side rope, maneuver there that didn't go exactly right. But I don't think that, based on the hype that Michael Cole gave, I think you got Penta light, which is good. You don't want to unleash everything day one. I just don't think Michael Cole should have delivered that line. But I just think that just keep featuring Penta every week and feature him against other guys that like Chad Gable, like JD. Dude, seriously, a lot of people I think would love to see Finn Balor and Penta. Just some opportunities for some matches, and then maybe work in a storyline driven narrative. But I do think that for the Judgment Day, I would give it a B- overall as a group. But the benefit is, and sometimes it's just great that a group kicked off and elevated some people that will succeed and take that early advantage of being in a group and a faction to go off and have success. I think it's time for Dom, and that's a perfect goal for 25. Dom needs to be elevated more. JD, Finn needs to be impactful in 2025 and do some things. And so, yes, I think that the goal should be by WrestleMania and the Judgment Day, and potentially, fuck it, I think it'd be fun just to have the Judgment Day eat itself from within. I'd love to see Dom and Finn Balor. I'd love to see JD and Dom. I'd love to see Dom and JD handle stuff and go after it, for just the very simple nature of, why did we fail? It's all your fault. Everybody blames each other. You got an inherent storyline right there. Finn Balor's like, this group was supposed to take me to the next level. You all held me back. You all secretly love Damian, and I'm pissed. And he just goes after each one of them. And that's how you kick off Finn for 2025. He just goes through the Judgment Day and wins 3 big feuds. But at the same time, Dom as well needs to kind of get in some feuds too. And I think I just talked myself into the first story after. The first feud for Penta should be Dom. It'd be fucking amazing. Dom could have the intrigue in saying, "You think you were better than my dad? God, please, you're just a nobody from some whack company, and you think you're gonna come here and take over, and you just have a nice series of matches and house shows? Oh my God, Dom and Penta would put some asses in some seats, and I'd love to see it."
Yeah, look, I really do like the idea of them fighting from within and them tearing each other apart. A lot of the infighting, a lot of the finger pointing, right? And it could all kind of center around Finn. You've already seen that arrogant side of him where he thinks he's the leader, even though they were supposed to be leaderless. Everybody was supposed to be on the same level. You could have Dom and JD being the last two, and that almost being like a heartbreaking breakup, right? Where, remember, Finn trained JD. Finn brought JD into the group, only to have Finn now turn on JD and say, "You're the reason that we're being held back," after he's already booted out Dom, after he's already booted out Carlito, after he's already pointed the finger at both Liv and Raquel. And then you could have that turn where Finn turns on JD, and they could be in the middle of the ring, and he could take a chair to his back. We've seen that time and time again. And then he could pick up a mic and say, "You were the reason we failed." And you could just kind of dissolve the group that way. And look, at a certain point, Finn needs to get a run. Finn needs to be elevated. Finn is fantastic. Out of everybody in that group, honestly, Finn Balor was probably the best wrestler in that group. Rhea Ripley, probably the best character, if you kind of go back through it. Edge at this point in the game, when he was in it, was Edge. He was more of a name. I don't think his in-ring work is necessarily better. You also have to remember the guy's mid-40s, 50s. Like, he's older, so he's more of a name. He was an established guy. Like you said, he was there to help elevate both Damian Priest and Rhea. Rhea, obviously, crazy over. Damian Priest helped take advantage of it. Got himself a world championship out of the deal. Has become a more known name. You look at what he's done. He's had some pretty good matches. I don't think he's had some world-class matches, but he's had some pretty good matches. And I think he's helped elevate himself from an area of being lower mid-card to definitely upper mid-card, main event status if the story's right. But you look at Carlito's comeback, hasn't done a whole lot. I think Dominic Mysterio has helped evolve and become a better wrestler, become a better part of what they were trying to do. He's learned a lot, and you can see his growth. So I think him versus Penta, I love that idea. I think that's a fantastic idea. You can go in that direction. But I think really and truly, when it comes down to it, JD really hasn't been elevated in this group. And how do you do that? You have Finn turn on JD, and it's basically Finn's one last gift to the group as he demolishes the group, as he helps elevate JD in a story. And I think that would be absolutely fantastic. I love that idea. I think it's a fantastic idea you have there. Switching gears to Friday Night SmackDown. Friday Night SmackDown I thought was a very good show. Another 3-hour program that moved pretty well. I'll be honest with you, watching SmackDown, I didn't necessarily find as many hot button topics to take out of it. But I think the big thing that came out of it was Solo was supposed to return. He comes down to the ring. He goes to cut a promo. Seems like he almost gets tongue-tied. Doesn't say anything. Drops the mic, takes his jacket off, and walks out of the building. Jacob picks up the mic and then cuts one of the most aggressive, bordering on Davison and Conut promos I've ever heard. And for those who don't know, that was where I grew up. So it was just really, 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 really kind of aggressive. A little bit hood. It kind of left you wondering what is going on with the Bloodline now. Bloodline 2.0, I should say. So is Solo just kind of taking a step back? Is Jacob now the leader? Is Jacob just picking up for his chosen one? What did you make of this segment? Because this was, one, it was really, really cool to see Jacob Fatu cut a promo. Two, the way he cut the promo was like I said, just aggressive and kind of all over the place. But three, Solo is now a giant question mark. You don't know what's going on with Solo. He lost to Ulafala. Did he lose his bloodline? Did he lose his voice? Like, what's taking place here? A lot of question marks kind of coming out of this. And honestly, it wasn't that long of a segment. It was only a couple of minutes, but it leads you with more questions than you have answers. And I love that. I thought that was absolutely fantastic. What do you make of this? What do you make of Jacob? What do you make of Solo? What do you make of Bloodline 2.0?
Yeah, it's going in a direction that's a little bit different than main event, right? It's going into a direction of, okay, you guys think that we're here to just mess around. Clearly, the number one thing that everyone's noticing is that Jacob is clearly the more well-rounded individual, the bigger star. Like he overtook Solo pretty much the second he debuted. Everyone realized, oh shit. Like, look, in some instances, Solo is an individual that's kind of just has all the good tools, like a B+ in everything. Can talk, is semi-intriguing, can wrestle, but there's just that one thing missing, which is, whoa, look at me, it factor. Like Jacob Fatu, just the way he moves, the way he looks, his intensity. Like, I think that for Solo, the big goal for him this year is to be more impactful, and also as well is to kind of do some things that to draw some attention to him in a way that makes him believable as the leader. Like, maybe not to be the official, like, okay, let's title it the leader, but he lost a lot of feuds, and basically he was the stepping stone. So it's still early in his career, but I would have thought, and they did allow him to win some matches at some PLEs that were intriguing, but in the end, he ended up being the loser of matches with Roman, Cody, and he took a lot of losses. So I do think that
he never really had that big match against that main event guy, that guy who was helping carry the company, whether it be Roman, whether it be Cody, whether it be a guy like a Seth Rollins even, who, you know, look, you go through the pantheon of where we're at right now. It is Cody and Roman, and then there's another tier after that, and that's kind of where Seth Rollins, CM Punk, where a lot of those guys are. Never really even had a big win over any of the guys like that. So you're right. Him getting to that upper echelon. Seems as though he's kind of hit a bit of a glass ceiling.
Absolutely. And so the Bloodline 2.0 now just has to reestablish themselves. And look, it's one of those deals where they did get a push. They got belts. They got opportunities. They got the time. So now they're just kind of taking a little bit of a step back. But now they want to say, okay, you guys were doubting us, LA Knight. Opportunities for them to get in the mix with others as well, I think will have a good chance to elevate them. And I think that's good because other stars will have a chance to get some rub off of the Bloodline. And you're just going to – I just think that they just kind of took a little bit of a downshift from fifth gear to fourth gear. But fourth gear should be pretty good this year. I'm curious to see how the feuds shake out. But in the end, cuz no doubt about it, we're going to see it. And probably in the neighborhood of SummerSlam, I would not be opposed to Jacob Fatu and Cody Rhodes. Man, that would be awesome.
That'd be fantastic.
I think they're heading in that way in 25, and I think that the goal should be to elevate Fatu into clear main event status. Kevin Owens, Cody Rhodes, Jacob Fatu, clearly poised for the biggest years on the SmackDown brand.
Yeah, most definitely. I agree with you 110%. Somebody else who's geared up for a big year, Tiffany Stratton had her first title defense, took on Bayley. Look, I thought it was a really good match. I thought it was everything that you wanted to see. I think Bayley helped continue this feud that she's got going on with Roxanne Perez. I think Tiffany Stratton, again, looked good. She shined. Though these matches are always a little bit weird because Tiffany Stratton technically is a face now, and Bayley is obviously a face. So a little bit weird when you get these face matches. Nobody's really a heel here. I thought it was good. What did you think of Tiffany's first defense? Again, I don't think it was anything that was necessarily like pay-per-view worthy, but I thought for her first title defense, I thought it was well done. I thought she kicks off the Tiffy Time era, and I think that she comes out with a little bit of a rub from Bayley, who went out there and really did make her look like a star.
Yes, and that's kind of, you look at it like it's a good starting point. You know, you and I, we always, and I think wrestling fans should have high standards that each match, each feud should have its own little bit of something there that can make it special and things like that. But for Tiff, I think she's just great because she's got the appeal. Like, you want to watch her be out there. You want to see what she's going to bring to the table. And I think for her, she can take it to the next level in the ring. So that's one of those deals where she brings it with A+ charisma. She's the right person to hold the title. And now she just has to have consistently world caliber championship matches, and that kind of the next step for those people is to have good ring chemistry, good psychology, clean matches, and matches that people will say, "Wow, this is worthy." Because when you're the champ, you got to be the best. Like, you have to be crisp. You got to move around the ring. You got to kind of own it. And I think she's getting there, but just not quite there just yet.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's still a little bit of shaping, a little bit of molding that has to be done with Tiffany Stratton. I think she has some of the prettier moves in her move set, and I think some of the stuff she does is pretty awe-inspiring, right? Like, you go back to Chelsea Green in that Money in the Bank match, right? Like, Chelsea Green left that match, even though she was a loser, she came out looking better for it, and she really got over. And I think she had one of the better sets of moves in that match. I think Tiffany Stratton, same thing, right? She's got a list of moves that you can look at and you're like, wow, that is awesome. That is impressive. She can do that. But there's still other things that need to get worked on. A few other things that need to get tightened up. I think we'll get there. Like you said, this is a good starting point. This is where we kind of kick things off. We'll see where we go from here. I think at some point they have to start to build out a long-term story, whether that's with Nia Jax or whether that's with somebody else. You got to start to maybe build out a long-term story for her just to kind of add a little bit to her character, right? Add a little bit of motivation. Get her a little bit more on the mic, cutting more believable promos, not so much the gimmicky, it's Tiffy time. You can have that at the end to close it, but you got to have some stuff with some passion. We got to feel that. I think we get there. But like you said, right now, good starting point. I want to get your thoughts on this report that I found where SmackDown is supposed to be going back to 2 hours. This is something we talked about last year towards the end of the year. SmackDown was supposed to go to 3 hours. Then it was maybe no, maybe yeah. If SmackDown does go to 3 hours, it'll eventually go back to 2. I found a report this week. SmackDown is supposed to be going back to 2 hours sometime in late May or early June. What do you think about the 3 hour run for SmackDown thus far? And what do you think about it going back to 2 hours?
I've enjoyed the 3 hours. Again, I like the opportunity because what I do is full stop. I enjoy 2020 on Friday nights. So I know it's all true crime shit, but it's interesting. And then I go back and I watch SmackDown on delay and I can go through it. So shorter times, I always agree with. I think is fine. But the 3 hours hasn't been bad because more people are getting time. LA Knight, Bloodline 2.0. The foreign groups are getting some time as well. Some storylines are developing. The Motor City Machine Guns. And it's so weird to say this, but and my daughter put it perfectly. She's like, "Why are those boys dressed like that?" I am just. It's just one of those deals where typically the way that Pretty Deadly dresses is not something that's going to get over. But they make you look at them because they're so outlandish.
They're very flamboyant.
Yeah, they're flamboyant, and you just look at them and they just amplify everything that they do. So you just want to keep looking at them. And their entrance has always been hilarious. We just clown on it. Me and my daughter do it like to joke around whenever they come out. We just start flapping our arms around and start like clowning around. If I had more hair, I'd flip it over my head. But it's hilarious that they do their thing. I like to see them get elevated. Austin Theory, I think, should also be in the mix to have a big year this year as well with his partner. So I just think that you look at it from the perspective of, I wonder how these stars are going to get over. There's so many in the mid card that have a chance. I'm curious to see which one breaks through. And I did think the third hour helped that. And maybe that's going to be the goal, is just to help get as many people over so that you can have opportunities to, when it goes back to 2 hours, that people want to see them. And there is some degree to that, which is less time means that we see a little bit less and then you miss them more. You know what I mean? Because when you have so many people on every single week, you get a little bit of oversaturated, and that's WWE's job, is that fine balance of keeping people relevant, but also making people miss the people that are out there, so that when they are there, when they make their entrance, it's like pretty cool.
So selfishly, I'll be happy when it goes back to 2 hours.
Right.
I've enjoyed 3 hours. I think 3 hours has been done well, but I find myself when I get into that final hour, I find myself really, really struggling to stay awake. By the time Friday rolls around, I am burnt. I am cashed out, whether it be from work, whether it be from the kid, whether it be from whatever. I'm usually looking to get ready for bed on a Friday at 10:30. I'm an old man now. So the 2 hours worked out perfect for me. Now, again, I think 3 hours has been done incredibly well. I think they've done a really nice job of highlighting a lot of different talent, and I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but selfishly, I will be happy when we go back to 2 hours. Again, it's been done as well as you could possibly do it, and I don't mind staying up to watch. I just sometimes find myself in that last 30 minutes, sometimes 45 minutes, struggling to keep the eyelids open. But it has been done incredibly well. Speaking of WWE and doing things well, I think we had a very, very good week from both Monday Night Raw and from Friday Night SmackDown. Did we miss anything or anything that you wanted to highlight or touch on specifically before we transition gears and go to AEW?
It was good to see The Miz on Raw. It's
Yes.
like, I think he's somebody that you just can't forget about The Miz. You gotta make sure that he's involved. Sami Zayn too.
Real quick, because you brought up The Miz. The whole thing with Final Testament, I feel like Final Testament on paper, when you look at it, you're like, this makes a lot of sense and this is going to be really, really good. And then the way it's been executed, I feel like Final Testament just doesn't work. Like Karrion Kross, I really want to like and I really want to get behind. And I could see him being this leader of angry people. But when I get what I get, it just, to me, there's a bit of a disconnect. What are your thoughts on Final Testament? And look, looping The Miz in, I think, gives you a little bit more charisma, which is fantastic. The Miz is obviously a fan favorite, whether you're loving him or you're hating him. And The Miz has the crowd psychology down. But I just don't know. I just don't know what the missing piece is with the Final Testament.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's just one of those deals where they're so firmly entrenched. It's basically Vince messed it up. That mask dug them a hole like 50,000 feet into the ground. Like Karrion Kross was like demolished, and now he's got to do work. It might take 2 years to get people to stop seeing that awful red mask. And he does a great interview where he said like he wanted to kind of be a company guy, but everybody in the world told him like the writers told him like, you gotta tell Vince, kill this, because once it debuted, you just now think of him as one of these parody guys on par with some of the worst gimmicks in the history of the wrestling business. So it's a big hole to climb, but I do think that this year maybe he's at the forefront of somebody that's got to take a step forward and be somebody that gets attention for delivering a line or a moment that people can get behind, because it feels like he's been given chances, but it's just falling short ever so slightly every single time he's in a feud.
Yeah, it just, like I said, man, it feels like I said, on paper, checks every box.
Yeah.
And then when you see it on screen, it doesn't captivate me. Like, if you're a good wrestler, like Roman Reigns walks on the screen, and you basically stop what you're doing. You're watching. We used to make jokes. It's a 15-minute entrance for a 20-minute match. And we would just sit there for 15 minutes watching him walk to the ring. We were just captivated by him walking to the ring. I don't know. Karrion Kross, the Final Testament, they just don't do that for me. And you look at the people in that group, there's a ton of talent there. Scarlett is absolutely beautiful, and she looks deadly. You've got Karrion Kross, who looks like he should possibly be on the side of a milk carton for being a serial killer. Like, he looks like he could kill you, And then you've got AOP, and you've got a ton of talent there, and for some reason just falls short. I don't know, man.
Maybe you know what? Maybe the feud that does it is somehow or another the Final Testament feuds with the Judgment Day, and the Final Testament utterly destroys them, and then you kick off the feud with the Judgment Day, where that's the final straw, where they start to break up, because it does kind of feel like there has to be bigger moments, and I think Karrion Kross defeating Finn Balor and putting Dom through a table might spark a nice
dude.
run.
I like that. I like that. That could be the thing that really leads them into their infighting. I like where your head's at, because it just, for some reason or another, man, it ain't working, and I don't know why. So I don't know.
Hey, do you think, on another note, would it work if somehow or another the Judgment Day goes back to the drawing board off of life support and somehow annexes the Final Testament and just adds Karrion Kross, and then maybe you let go of the tag team and let them do their own thing? Maybe do you think Karrion Kross maybe is the final piece to make the Judgment Day supreme? That's also an idea as well, is to just kind of combine these two meddling groups and figure this shit out.
What would be an interesting story would be if you were to add Karrion Kross and obviously Scarlett, and there would be this little back and forth. It'd be kind of hitting Control C, Control V, where they have this little bit of a weird power struggle between Karrion Kross and Finn, and in the end, it is Karrion Kross who takes over leadership of the group, and Scarlett is kind of at his right hand, and she kind of sits above both Liv and Raquel, even though she does absolutely nothing besides being eye candy. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. That could be a way to fix this. I like when we sit there and we do these creative, where we basically have our own creative round table, and we start throwing stuff out. We start putting groups together, and we start writing stories for wrestling. It works out much better.
Yeah, I think so too. It's fun. It's fun to think about, and I'm curious to see how because, like I said, that's the goal this year. The WWE roster is getting pretty bloated, and I don't know, WrestleMania is that time where they start doing cuts, but I do think some people, it's do or die for them this year.
Yeah, I agree with you 110%. At some point, and we're going to have one of those things, because it's just what WWE does. There'll be a point where they start kind of, for lack of a better term, trimming fat, right? And they start letting different guys go. Different guys, if you're good enough, you'll be like a Drew McIntyre, where you'll repackage yourself, or a Cody Rhodes, repackage yourself, and then you can come back even better than you were before. We'll see what happens. I anticipate seeing some of these guys ending up in AEW. Speaking of AEW, Kenny Omega had his first match on Dynamite since his big return. I want to get your thoughts on this match. Him and Brian Cage, I thought, had a really good match. I think Kenny Omega does a really good job selling ring rust. I don't think Kenny Omega was anywhere near as rusty as he made it seem, because he had a fantastic match against Gabe Kidd over in New Japan, and he did not look rusty at all in that match. What were your thoughts on Kenny Omega coming back? We talked about last week how the promo was kind of meandering, and it didn't necessarily deliver, didn't necessarily sell. I thought this match was really well done. I thought him getting Brian Cage, who's a monster of a man, getting him up for the One-Winged Angel. I thought it was a fantastic move, and it shows where Kenny's actually at. And he is, I want to say, 110%. I think he is back, and he is ready to go.
That's it, man. Great time off, well used. I'm glad he's okay. You always kind of worry about those that are dealing with the issues that he had. They're severe, but it feels like, with Brock Lesnar and him now, it feels like, okay, with time and healing and rest and recovery and not taking so many blows to the midsection, that you can probably heal up from something like that, which is good news. Look, Kenny Omega, it just feels like, and this is the tough part, is that I know I see it a lot online. Many people just wish that he would go to WWE. And I think the thesis with that is, this is a star. This is a mega star. And he's not being packaged that way because of the stops and the starts, the silliness of his EVP role. Look, this is Kenny Omega. Okay, so this means world championship opportunities. This means standing across from Ospreay, standing across from Okada, Takeshita, big time shit. So I think a good match against Cage is fine, but this guy needs to be highlighted like this is a star, like this is a Seth Rollins, this is a John Cena-esque individual. And look, I'm looking at it like a reset. The last 2 years were up and down. It sucks because that's the start of your prime, I think, in wrestling, is when you can put it all together psychologically in the ring is about 38, 39. And then you get that nice run until you're 45. You get that little good niche of 6 years where I think you put it all together, where your psychology is on point, where you know everything, where you've wrestled so many big stars at the moment's not too big that you can have 50 kind of matches with different individuals. So right in his prime, it's been halted due to health, but he's still in that sweet spot at 40, 41. You got to get your shit together. You got to have some great memories. And it's weird in that some of these AEW guys are creating more memories in New Japan that are more memorable than they are in AEW. That's a fucking weird thing to do, where you're in AEW, one of the top 3 companies in the world, but every time you go to New Japan, everyone's like, "Holy shit! Did you see Kenny Omega and Gabe Kidd? Did you see the jump over the rope, the match, 10 stars, la 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 la?" And then it gets to AEW, and it's like, "Oh, Brian Cage, okay," and you're like, it's like, dude, come on, like, it's okay. You can have Will Ospreay talk his shit and Kenny Omega come out, or you could just have Kenny Omega say, "I'm coming for it all," and just stand right there. Simple. He stands in the crowd watching Jon Moxley for a couple of weeks. Like, okay, he's looking, he's like, I feel like I'm ready. And you just throw him right in. Like, there's some guys that you don't need to, let's introduce Kenny Omega and have it go slow. Like, I know some guys, you want to work him in slow, and we've said that on this podcast, but not Kenny Omega. He's the Shawn Michaels of this era. Like, put him in some shit that people are interested in. So that's the next step, is like, okay, ring rust, okay, maybe 1 or 2 matches a month, but let's move this along. It's Kenny Omega, and you don't even know how many matches he's got left. Let's maximize it. Let's have like 10 dream matches in a row. Let's go.
If you were to pick a wrestler from each brand, right? So AEW, Raw, SmackDown, and you were to pick that wrestler to represent your company, Kenny Omega would be that guy that AEW would pick, right? Like, he is the superstar. He is the generational talent. He is the guy who has some of the best, if you want to go with stars, some of the best starred matches ever. He has great psychology. He does a fantastic job. And you're right. When he goes to New Japan, they give him the creativity and they give him the runway to be able to do what he has to do and what he wants to do. Here in AEW, it feels as though he's almost shackled, whether it is constraints from creative or whether it is constraints from what he's going up against. I don't know. It just, to me, it feels like Kenny Omega came to America and we expected this gigantic star to shine even brighter. And it really feels like the star dimmed when he got with AEW. When he was in New Japan, it was all we talked about. Like, we would run shows where 35-40% of that show was just us talking about New Japan wrestling, talking about Kenny Omega. You go back, I think it was 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, we would do shows like that.
Yeah.
And now it's, the star on Kenny Omega, like I said, just feels like it is just not as bright as it once was. And to your point, a lot of stop and starts. The health issues, obviously a big deal, but it just feels as though you're not getting what you used to get with Kenny Omega over in New Japan, and I don't know why.
And here's a perfect juxtaposition to tell the difference between the two companies. Right now in 2025, the perception of AEW is AEW, always everyone's wasted. Okay? And they got to get back to all elite wrestling. Look at Cody Rhodes. He goes to WWE. He gets the star treatment. His first match, WrestleMania. Who's it up against? It's not up against The Miz. It's not up against El Phantasmo or Rey Mysterio. No disrespect to them, but it's up against Seth Rollins at WrestleMania. Boom, the crowd reaction, the biggest moment, the biggest return. Everybody's like, holy shit. Now there's and there was also too, there's an injury, a big injury. But they told the story like, hey, this guy's trying to fight for something, and they created a 2-year story that made everybody, salivate at the notion that Cody Rhodes is going to win a title. So you got to do that with your biggest stars. And with AEW, it just feels like they miss time when they put guys together, and they misrepresent and misuse when feuds are happening with the right people. So I hope it doesn't go that way for Takeshita, Ospreay, Okada, and Kenny Omega. But it's time to create these guys, to take them, and you got to combine it perfectly with the right story, the right matches, and tell the story that this guy's one of the baddest dudes on the planet. And let's go. And let's stop making him some background EVP kind of person. No disrespect, but Kenny Omega is not Chris Daniels. Like, Kenny Omega is Kenny Omega. Highlight the guy. Packages, interviews, matches, big-time feuds, and I think he's probably worthy of being in the conversation to have a 6-month run to be the world champion.
Yeah, and look, speaking of best versions of themselves, I think you might be getting that with a guy like Ricochet, right? Like, this is a guy who came into AEW, and we talked about it for a couple of weeks where we're like, this is basically WWE's version of Ricochet. This is like the worst version of Ricochet. Ricochet has always been a guy who's been very interesting in the ring. Not so interesting in captivating and telling a story. Never really had a very interesting character. They might have figured something out here with him, because this is the most interested I have been in a Ricochet character or any version of Ricochet that I've ever seen, besides maybe Lucha Underground. And even in Lucha Underground, he was just one of the best wrestlers on the program. There was not a whole lot other than that. It wasn't a whole lot of depth. This version of Ricochet, I'm really into. What are your thoughts on this new version of Ricochet, this almost Andrew Tate-like version of Ricochet?
I think it's good, because I think there's a portion of it that has the believability that's real. A little bit of shit talking, a little bit of that swagger, like, I don't care what people think. No problem. It's different. It's vastly different, and I think that's good in regards to starting new with somebody, because you didn't want the same character that you had in WWE, because it wasn't over. And I think that's the next step too, is you got to have more percentage hits of ideas get over. This one has a chance, and I think it will. So good on Ricochet, good on the company. As much as we rail on ideas that don't work, this one probably has a good chance to work.
Yeah, I agree with you 110%. I think this is going to be that defining role for Ricochet. I think this is going to help elevate him up into the conscience of most fans and into the minds of a lot of wrestling people. So I think this is fantastic. I do want to say what we're going to talk about next. I want to move that down our pecking order here. I just want to move it down one. I want to get into this women's casino gauntlet match for the number one contender. I don't think it was a big surprise. Toni Storm ends up winning. Look, I don't know what we're trying to do with Toni Storm in this new, this almost amnesia-like character that she has, where she doesn't remember that she was at one time in AEW. She doesn't remember that she was at one time the AEW Women's World Champion. She doesn't remember that her and Mariah May had this thing, and then Mariah May turned on her. I'm all about it, right? I'm going to go for the ride. But when we get to this gauntlet match, I don't think there was any big surprise. I do think her winning was the right call. I think the bigger thing about it was you had a female wrestler debut, and she looked absolutely awesome. First, I want to get to Toni Storm. What are your thoughts on Toni Storm winning this gauntlet match? And obviously, I think you're going to agree with me. I think it was the right call. But what did you make of AEW with Toni Storm now getting set to face Mariah May at the first Australian pay-per-view that AEW has ever done.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I think that this is a continuation of a feud that we saw, and I'm intrigued by it. And I do think that Toni Storm, this new version, okay, it's interesting. It's maybe not as interesting as it could be, but I think that Toni Storm versus Mariah May, many matches I think will allow them to continue their story. And I do think that Mariah May will get a nice rub from wrestling Toni Storm. But it'll be interesting because I do think Mariah May needs to keep this title for quite a bit because All Eyes on Her is not bad. I think she's starting to put it together where her personality and her wrestling performances are making it so that she's definitely worthy of being the champion, and I think she should be the champion for quite a bit. So it'll be a good time, good for the crowd to enjoy this female feud and how it shakes out. But now you got to tell a good story in this version of the feud.
Yeah, and look, I think Mariah May, specifically on commentary, I think she has helped get this women's division over. I think she has helped get other women over. I think she has done a fantastic match. Now, that being said, there have been times where she's had matches that I've been less than impressed, but I think she has helped elevate parts of this women's division because she's got a look. I think she's got a very quick wit. I think she is low-key funny, and she does this all with that heel snark, and I think it's well done. In this match, in this gauntlet match, we had Megan Bayne, who was the shocking debut. I think she's got a fantastic look. Like, she came out and your eyes are instantly drawn to her, right? Like, I was like, okay, all right, let's see what you can do. And I thought she held her own in this. I thought Mariah May, speaking of Mariah May on commentary, I think she helped put her over. I think Megan Bayne can be a big deal if they do a good job packaging her well and packaging her right. If you look at the wrestlers that were in this gauntlet match, you had Chris Statlander, you had Jamie Hayter. Jamie Hayter at one point was one of the biggest stars in AEW. Really has struggled to find that traction since coming back. Don't really know what she's doing. Don't really know what the direction is for her character. Chris Statlander, we've talked about often, has had a lot of really good matches, is a reliable hand. She really does feel like she's kind of always on the verge of hitting that main card status, but she just feels like she's upper mid card all day. Julia Hart, very interesting character, and has come a long way from being basically a valet and just kind of being somebody on the side to really kind of figuring things out and having a very good character that people are into. Willow Nightingale, we feel like they botched her. She was somebody who, if they would have got on the Willow Nightingale trail earlier, they really could have pushed her to the moon and she could have been that homemade star. And it kind of feels like she's kind of right there with Chris Statlander in that upper mid-card status. Then you've got Toni Storm, who is obviously heads and tails above everybody on this list. I think if Megan Bayne can get to that level, you are going to have something because she's got a fantastic look and she can move in the ring. And then you have Harley Cameron, who is lower mid-card. She's more of a comedic act. I think she's got a good look herself, and I think her character is funny, just haven't given her enough runway yet to really develop anything. So to me, you got some talent in this gauntlet match. I think Toni Storm was the right choice. I think it was an obvious choice. I think the bigger thing coming out of the gauntlet match is what does AEW's creative have for Megan Bayne, and are they going to be able to elevate her? Are they going to be able to get her up the standings and get her up into that upper mid card and then up into that main event? And can she be a main event player? Fingers are crossed because, like I said, she has a fantastic look. We did have a monster return. Samoa Joe ends up returning. And it's not so much that I want to talk about him showing back up, because it was cool to see Joe. But I think with Samoa Joe at this point in his career, and Joe kind of comes and goes depending on what's going on with Twisted Metal, which is the series that he is in based off of the video game from when we were kids. I want to know what you think Joe can add to this roster with his return, and what do you think creative can do to help elevate Joe, to make him be a guy who is top of mind, we look at him more like, man, he needs to be fighting for a title. Man, he needs to be choking out Jon Moxley. Man, he needs to be in a grudge match against a guy like a Kenny Omega. Man, he needs to be in a very important feud. What do you think Joe can add to AEW, and what do you think AEW can add to Joe?
Yeah, it's one of those deals where maybe You know, the great stories that he tells just got to be used to kind of elevate. So in essence, you know, Joe comes in and, you know, perfect example, you probably need to have him in a feud with Ricochet. And Ricochet whoops his ass and does some things to kind of get over. Just, you know, intriguing where you got to have the right mix of kind of the John Cena role where you're kind of putting a lot of people over, but you're still relevant. So I don't think, look, he had his run as the world champion. You know, I think you and I considered it not the best. And it ended up kind of being the highlight of the beginning of the crowd dissipating. So it's one of those deals where he can be very interesting. He's basically a perfect mid-carder, and he's just got to be in that fine sweet spot of winning and losing. But at the same time, it's kind of, you know, I don't know how many times do we want to see the same 3 matches with the same people, but I think that, you know, you still got you got a nice piece there. And you got a nice individual who can tell promos, tell stories, and I'm glad he's back. He deserves to be in the mix. But the one thing that I didn't like, I know we liked Dynamite. I liked it as a whole. I'm not liking Jeff Jarrett and MJF. It's like,
I was gonna go there. I wanted to ask you about this.
I don't like it. Like Jeff Jarrett, I love his flowing hair. Like it's crazy looking. The promos were great though. That's the sick part. Is like Jeff Jarrett held his own. But Jeff Jarrett's like decrepit. Like, come on.
What did you make of the line? What did you make of the line where you had MJF basically be like, "You are the face of," you know, basically like refer to him as the face of death. Like you are the face of every last promotion before it dies. And referring to, well, I think it was like, I don't think it was GCW. It was he had obviously a TNA. Then he had another weird little offshoot wrestling promotion that died quickly, and now he's in AEW. And a lot of fans took it the wrong way. Like if you're a smart fan, you kind of took it the right way. But if you were just kind of there, you took it the wrong way, and it caused a lot of stir, a lot of buzz online. A lot of people got upset about it. I thought it was well done. I thought it was a good line. But that's because I can read between the lines there.
Yes, we all know it. But it's just like, it's MJF again. Like MJF, Jeff Jarrett. Like it's a weird thing. I get the tie there, but like Jeff Jarrett, like, really needs to be a valet. Like he needs to just kind of be in a group. Like him getting like the idea of this is my last year in the company and I need a world title run. It's kind of like, what is this, like a grand tour for Jeff Jarrett? Like, look, it's one of those deals where I get it that he's a living legend. He's been in all the companies, but if you're AEW, sometimes you got to protect the guy from himself. He's he's in great shape. It's great, but listen, we don't like pussyfoot around it. He ain't gonna put no asses in no seats.
No,
not at all. And you're wasting MJF's time. Like, come on. Like, oh yeah, MJF is gonna lose to Jeff Jarrett. Like, we all know what's gonna happen. There's no suspension of disbelief. Great, you got 2 guys making fun of each other. Okay, fine. I mean, I besides maybe the hardcore Jeff Jarrett fans, like the 2,000 people that were in the seats, those are probably the only 2,000 people who know who Jeff Jarrett is at this point in time. So let's not be disrespectful. Jeff Jarrett's a living legend. It's great lines. I'm not a fan of using Owen Hart in these promos. I thought that was corny.
So I want to go there real quick because at that moment in time, that was when this whole thing kind of jumped the shark for me.
Yeah.
So you sit there and you call out Jeff Jarrett's wife and you make a mockery of her. And you basically tell her that you're going to use her like a prostitute and then send her on her way back home to you. And that doesn't get you riled up. That doesn't get you upset. That doesn't piss you off. The moment you start talking about Owen Hart, then you get fired up. Wait, what? Like, what? Let me put it to you like this. If we were hanging out and you said something about one of my buddies, I would be like, okay, no problem. You say something about my wife that's disrespectful, me and you're going to have a very serious conversation. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, at that moment in time, it doesn't make sense to me. He's basically talking about banging your wife and then sending her home so you can taste his balls. But the moment he mentions your dead friend, you lose your shit. It did, like, at that moment in time, there was a disconnect for me. I was like, okay, this is dumb. I'm over this. And like, I was just over it. Like at that moment in time, I was like, you kind of lost me.
Yeah, it was, Yeah, I don't need the balls reference. I was going to say that too. I'm like, I'm not interested in all that. So it's all good, brother. Let's just get into this feud, get out of it, and the better for both.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you 110%. What was your show of the week? I thought Dynamite was very, very good. I thought Monday Night Raw, very, very good. And I thought SmackDown was very good. Where do you want your point to go this week?
Look, man, it's tough. It's very tough. But I think that I did want to say about Raw, it's time for them to start Raw with a match because it's 2-0 with the promos. But I love the intro with Drew, CM Punk, talking about the Royal Rumble. So I'm going to give it to Raw.
Yeah, Dynamite, incredibly close this week. I thought it was a really good show. There were some things that were a little bit wonky, but I think this has been Dynamite's best show in a very, very long time. That being said, I think Monday Night Raw was still the show of the week. I thought there was a lot that came out of it. I thought it helped move a lot of stuff along. You ready for some news and notes?
Hit me with this week's professional wrestling news and notes. What made your list?
So we got a short list this week, but there's a lot of interesting stuff here. This WWE personality is very unhappy with his position within the company. Corey Graves took to Twitter to voice his frustrations on his current role. PW Insider has provided further insight into the issues with Graves having a change in WWE, stating that there has been rumblings over the last several weeks that Graves wasn't happy with his position within the company. In Graves' tweet, there is a reference to being told you're not famous enough for your own job, which is noted as a potential allusion to Graves noting having the name recognition of either Pat McAfee or Joe Tessitore. Graves' post reads as follows. Imagine chasing your dream, then being told, in capital letters, not deciding, that you're no longer physically able to pursue your dream. Then you dedicate your life to something, dream adjacent, and being pretty effing awesome at it. And then, when it's time to enjoy the fruits of your labor, being told you're not famous enough for your own job. Just in case you're wondering where I've been. Graves was forced to retire as a wrestler in December of 2014 and would transition into the company duties across WWE brands, where he has shown incredible talent as a commentator. Graves would not be on NXT this week and would later remove his post. There are conversations that he may be suspended right now. Certain WWE higher-ups referred to this as being a shoot and him being very upset. And at some point, they may turn this into a storyline. But right now, this is very real life. Corey Graves very upset about being removed from Raw and SmackDown. And then, if you want to look at it this way, being demoted to NXT. So we'll keep an eye on what takes place with Corey Graves as we move forward. And now the rich keep getting richer. WWE and TNA announced a multi-year partnership earlier this week where TNA and NXT talent will be exchanged. This announcement comes from the frequent collaborations between WWE and TNA over the last 12 months. TNA stars such as Jordynne Grace, Joe Henry, and the Rascals all made a splash on NXT, where the likes of Wendy Chu, Riley Osborne, and Adriana Grace appeared on TNA programming. My estimation, I think NXT got the better of that deal. But hey, whatever. TNA gets to work with WWE. They'll take it. Most recently, TNA Knockouts champion Misha Slamovich was shown in the crowd on January 14th's WWE NXT, later teasing a match with NXT's Cora Jade. They didn't tell us how long this multi-year partnership is. I'm assuming this is probably going to be closer to a 3-year deal. I think this is great for TNA, and I think it's great for WWE. WWE, they have their NIL thing, right? And it's cool, it's fine. You're basically getting indie wrestlers off the indie scene. You are now opening up a doorway to TNA where you can start pretty much poaching that talent, and that talent is much more ready to come into your company and provide fantastic matches, and they have name recognition. You know who Jordynne Grace is. You know who Joe Henry is. You know who the Rascals are. You know who these people are. So I think this really does help bolster NXT and possibly WWE's main roster. At some point, though, WWE is going to have to reciprocate, and I would hate for WWE to just pillage TNA. I would like for WWE to help reload and restock and help TNA out in different facets. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but that's going to be it for this week's news and notes.
Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. Man, a good week of wrestling, a good year to kick off. It's an amazing time, collaborations galore. It just makes the Royal Rumble that much more interesting. Who's going to show up? And I do think that potentially some big name stars from TNA will be in this Royal Rumble. Genesis, not to discount TNA, is probably going to feature the coronation of Joe Hendry as he takes on Nick Nemeth for the World Heavyweight Championship. It's going to go down, I think, next weekend. I think that's going to highlight a great card to kick off the year for them in Dallas. Look, it's no doubt that TNA was going to work with WWE. It was just probably the early run with Jordan Grace was a test run, and they realized, oh shit, some of our biggest impressions were Jordan Grace and Joe Hendry showing up in NXT, and it's just great. And I do think, though, that it kind of also needs to kind of filter back down where maybe Ethan Page shows up at TNA, maybe handle some business where probably when Joe Hendry eventually wins, I think that the next person to show up in the ring should be Ethan Page, and you could have some fun back and forth. So it's going to be a real collaboration where TNA can also be another feeder system where WWE realizes, oh, that guy's over, that guy gets an opportunity in WWE, and they can become superstars. And so it's just great for TNA. And I know that people, look, it is what it is. TNA is, a distant third, but they're rising, and they're interesting, and they deserve respect, and it has been given now, being that WWE wants to work with them. And so it can only be good for the performers to have this collaboration, and I can't wait to see how it all shakes out. For Adam the Jock Strozinski, I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Let's fire it up next week for the next edition of the Doc and Jock Wrestling Podcast on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.